In the world of capitalism, in the labor market, there's a relationship between the employer and the hired employee. And it's a power relationship. And when an individual worker is in that relationship by themselves with a powerful employer, it's not an even struggle. The individual worker has little or no power in that circumstance. They can be easily replaced and they can be easily fired. A guild or a union is an organization of collective union or worker power to balance the power in that relationship for the benefit of all the individuals in the group. And so when even creative talent needs an organization to strengthen themselves through collective power. In our guild system, and in fact, because talent, because writers have so much power and are so important, if they're smart enough to work together collectively through a union, their union can be stronger than almost any other kind of union in the industrial sector, because writers are irreplaceable. And if they are not played off one against another, and in a sense become enemies because they're not united, but instead become united and work together, their ability to negotiate collectively and to win benefits and wage conditions and creative rights and freedoms is far beyond what they can do individually. So, for example, in the American system of what we call guilds, which is essentially a union for talent, for writers, writers have achieved, and almost all of these things via strike, when everybody withdrew their labor at the same time in an organized collective action. They gained health care, they gained pension benefits, they gained residuals, which is payment for their work when it's reused in other markets. They gained the right to have proper credits for their work instead of having their work stolen. They gained minimums for writing a screenplay that were many times higher than what they were paid before. So within that guild system and within the collective organization of that power, writers have achieved over decades a standard of living far beyond anything that they could have done individually. And the irony is that because writing and creative work is in a sense so individual, it's not in a sense teamwork many times. It's very individual. There's a tendency for writers to think, I don't need a union or I don't belong in a union because I work by myself. I'm not working with a team. But yet that collective power of negotiating with powerful employers as a group of writers has won for writers tremendous economic and political benefit through a period of approximately 75 years. One of the things that a union can do, probably the first thing that it has to do, is organize its jurisdiction, get control of the market, make sure that the supply of labor for a particular area has to be union. We had a strike in 2007 and 2008, and the fundamental purpose of that strike was to guarantee that any work that the companies in the media industry did on the internet had to be covered by our union contract. It wasn't covered before. We didn't have it in our jurisdiction. So that fundamental battle, the first battle of any unionism, is to have jurisdiction, to have the right to be negotiated with in a market. And that's one of the things we won in our strike. And it was done through union power, the same power that got us control of the film business, the television business, and all the benefits that I mentioned was utilized to get control over the internet space. So we can now say to any employer who wants to hire a Writers Guild member and doesn't want to hire them under the Writers Guild contract, no, you can't do that. You have to hire them under our contract. they are not allowed to work on the internet unless it's covered by a guild agreement. And then further, through that same strike and through that same organizing, we extended many of the benefits that already existed for film and television into the sphere of the internet. So the same protections I talked about, proper crediting, proper minimums, health and pension contributions, residuals for reuse of the work, or if the work is taken from new media and reused on television or becomes a feature film, all of those protections that we had in film and television, we've now moved into the area of the internet. There is a branch of law in the United States that's called antitrust law. And the idea is that if companies combine and fix prices, it's not good for society. That they can, instead of charging a fair price, they can raise the price if there's only a few companies by coordinating with each other and agreeing to all charge a higher price. That same law of antitrust can be applied to labor and to the idea of union organizing and to the idea of having a collective bargaining agreement and say, well, that's an antitrust violation. You can't organize a union. Unions are illegal. But in labor law in the United States, through many struggles in the street, strikes, political action, workers won the right under the labor law to have a union and to negotiate collectively in the way that I described a few minutes ago. In a sense, that's an antitrust violation. But the law realizes that when you have huge, powerful employers, that if there's no force for workers to combine their strength, then the fight isn't even and society suffers because people can't make a living if they can be paid anything that an employer wants to pay them. And so we have an exception in antitrust law in the United States that allows us to organize, and that exception extends to the entertainment industry and to writers and actors and directors and everyone who works in this industry. One of the problems in many countries around the globe is that writers have not won the right or are viewed as not having the right to organize and to bargain collectively and to set a fair wage for their labor. And so the circumstances you're referring to is a problem in European law, in my opinion, as an outsider, and in Spanish law, where you say to writers, you don't have the right to work together and to set a minimum for your labor. But that's not fair because the companies are big and powerful and writers need a way to defend their interests. And in that circumstance, I still go back to the first principle I talked about, which is organizing power. The first thing that a union needs to do in that circumstance is to be active politically to change the law so that they have the right to organize and to set those minimums that you were referring to. That is the first right of any union, is the right to exist and to win laws and to operate in a political environment that allows you to function economically. And that's the problem that I see here, and the contradiction in European law or Spanish law, which says that a corporation can be big and powerful and set prices and pay you whatever you want, but if writers unite to try to say, well, we need to make a fair wage for our work, then that's considered a violation of the law. And that's just not fair, in my view. And it's damaging writers, and it's damaging to society, because it creates a power imbalance where people that are creating art and creating something that is valuable to society can't make a decent living when they do it. And that's not right, and it's not fair. But again, to go back to your original question, well, what's the answer? What do we do about it? The answer is to organize politically. Before you can organize economically, you have to win political rights. And that's the problem that I see here, is that all the writers need to be in a powerful labor movement and be active politically and do what's necessary politically to change the laws either in the European Union or in Spain so that they can't be fined for defending their own interests, because that's just not right. And that's a huge problem in my view. And it's really hypocritical for governments to go to people who really don't have much power and are just trying to defend their own interests and use anti-competition laws against workers, or in this case, creative intellectuals who are writers. It's just not fair and it's not right.
We find it
We thought
overwhelming.
that since it's so familiar
Creative
with science,
evolution,